The bell tolls at midnight. Greetings. I'd like to welcome all of my midnight marauders. Come on in, get comfy, and lend me your imagination. Sometimes praying for someone for a more positive outcome is a blessing, but pretending to ask God to grant them grace while quietly working on their downfall is in fact the real work of the devil. I resume this midnight tale with our second entry, Sista Sable Sinclair and the Glorified Curse, Part 2, The Neighborhood Watcher. Sable was startled awake to her cell phone ringing in her purse as she sat in the living room recliner. She rubbed her eyes, trying to focus as the sun shone brightly between the white curtains hung loosely against the large windows. "Oh, Lord, my back," said a stiff and exhausted Sable as she began to stand, having slept in the same upright position in this old-fashioned chair for more than 5 hours. "My goodness, I'm sore," Sable whined. She walked over to the console and grabbed her purse, noticing that one of the straps was beginning to tear, dug inside fishing around for her phone just as it began ringing again. Sable felt the phone vibrating and was able to retrieve it. Sable looked to see who was calling, and to her complete joy, it was Frankie. "Oh, Frankie, I'm so glad you called. Your house is lovely. Everything is such a beautiful reminder of the good old days." Sable laughed. Frankie, humored, asked, "How are you holding up, Sable?" "I'm feeling a little better, but I just can't believe Josiah is gone, Frankie," said Sable, with an emotional crack in her voice. "Well, I got news for you, Sable, and I hope you're sitting down, sweetie." An inquisitive Sable quickly asked, What are those hypocritical vampiric church demons trying to say about me now?" "They have nothing on me," barked a furious and defensive Sable. Frankie exclaimed, "That's just it, Sable. They have all completely disappeared." Suddenly there was silence from Sable. I mean, not a peep, not a murmur. Frankie yelled, "Sable, are you still there? Did you hear what I just said?" "Yes, I heard you," Sable answered in a small, depleted voice. "It's my fault, Frankie. I prayed they'd all go away and leave me alone, just like I prayed Josiah would die. It all comes true. Every negative or imprecatory prayer I pray comes true. I'm cursed. I may as well get used to it." Frankie interrupted Sable's slow-building crash out by saying, "Remember what I told you, Sable. No more prayers of revenge. Also, from what I'd been told by Lottie McDaniels, who closes the Piggly Wiggly, Carol Newberry said the town is baffled by the disappearance of the whole congregation. Looks like they believe you were among the vanished congregation, and that would leave you in the clear. Not to mention I had to work Sunday morning, so..." Sable felt a huge weight lift off of her chest. She nervously asked, "Frankie, what about Josiah's body?" Frankie responded, "Oddly enough, the whole church was completely empty when officers arrived. Not a soul or body in sight." Frankie added, "I asked Geraldine to help you find a job, and she agreed. She's a real cool friend. She'll look out for you until you land on your feet." Sable replied, "She is pretty cool. Thanks so much, Frankie, for everything. But Frankie, when will you be coming to live in Arizona?" Frankie paused, then stuttered, saying, I'm not quite sure. I really don't have anyone to run the store right now, and I can't just leave abruptly. People depend on me to keep their jobs intact, and the Piggly Wiggly doors open for their families. You understand, don't you, girly girl? Oh, and that church is going to need construction done on the inside as well as the outside. Let's just play it by ear and see how it goes for now. Okay, Sable?" A somewhat confused Sable agreed as she heard the Piggly Wiggly bell chime with a customer entering the store. Frankie quickly said, Girl, go put some damage on that credit card, Get you some groceries, some new cute clothes, and a cocktail or two, Sable. Go out and use the credit card I gave you, okay? Gotta go, girly. Give Geraldine my love. Talk to you soon. Frankie hung up the phone. Sable sat back down in this soft, winter-green 50s-style chair while rubbing the back of her head behind her right ear, noticing it was starting to scab and still very sore. She was unsure of Frankie's hesitant attitude about coming to Arizona, especially after everything that took place in Alabama. Hell, after all, this is his house, she thought to herself, but knew better than to question Frankie's timing, because after all, he was definitely her saving grace. Sable walked down a short, carpeted hallway and into the small bathroom decorated with sunflowers. She looked in the mirror and noticed dried grits on her pink sweat top and leaned over the sink, brushing them off into the sink bowl. She turned the hot water on, noticing the old-fashioned short legs on either side of this throwback tub, Sable whispering underneath her breath, "I would have preferred a shower instead." Nonetheless, Sable noticed a bottle of gardenia-scented bubble bath on the bathroom counter and thought to herself, how odd. But then thought, not really. Frankie loved all forms of perfumes, not to mention decor and fashion. Sable poured a nice amount of the bubble bath into the tub, excited about the luxurious, fluffy clouds of bubbles she was about to submerge herself in, adding a few sprinkles of the Epsom salt to soothe her aching back that she'd seen in a small box sitting underneath the sink. Sable walked into the bedroom and opened the old-fashioned drawer, noticing all of these beautiful brand-new nightgowns and robes to match, with the tags still on them. It intrigued Sable at how everything was set up for her, almost as if Frankie prepared a space for her. She looked at this old Bible with the silk foo-foo pink ruffled book sleeve covering it and seemed taken aback that she hadn't noticed it prior. She kept thinking of this name in beautiful cursive writing on the inside of the Bible, Jacqueline Belladonna, and wondered if it belonged to a longtime acquaintance of Frankie's. She dismissed the thought of it being a relative on the count of Frankie never mentioning anyone with that name before. As a matter of fact, Frankie never mentioned any of his family members, Sable recalled. She hesitantly grabbed one of the robes and held it out in front of her, and it seemed to look like her exact size. Sable scratched her head as she sat on the edge of the bed, baffled by the array of evening wear. She pulled a gown out of the drawer and held it up close to her, noticing it also was in her size. Sable stood and opened up the closet, curious as to what was stored behind this door, pulled down the old-fashioned hanging light string dangling in the center of the closet, and was amazed at the endless rows of skirt suits, blazers, furs, and heels, and not to mention some pretty fancy hats adorned with breathtaking, head-turning designs. Sable stared at all of the intricate handbags that seemed to go with almost every outfit. There hung rows of leather skirts and pants, and a few questionable garments displayed on silky pink hangers deep in the right corner of the closet. Sable heard an unusual splashing noise, and in a panic remembered she'd left the bath water running to fill up the tub, and ran into the bathroom where the tub of water was overflowing onto the linoleum floor. Sable, in one motion, quickly rushes forward with an outstretched hand gripping the tub handle, turning off the water. "Damn it!" Sable yelled aloud, then startled as she heard the vintage doorbell ring resembling the sound of a phone ringing. Sable swiftly grabbed the towels hanging on the towel rack in the bathroom and laid them on the floor, trying to absorb the water, and tiptoed out of the bathroom, closing the door behind her. The doorbell sounded again, and Sable yelled out, "Just a second!" rushing to the door saying, "Who is it?" The voice replied, "Hey Sable, it's Geraldine. Got a minute?" Sable felt relieved opening the door as a stunning-looking, well-put-together Geraldine strutted inside. "How's it going, Sable?" asked Geraldine as she walked over toward the sofa, taking a seat, her freshly polished, manicured red nails cupped in her lap. Geraldine, wearing a pixie-cut jet-black wig that complemented her narrow face that displayed lovely high cheekbones and natural lashes. Sable admired her diamond stud earring of the most beautiful aquamarine stones as she sat across the room, curiously looking at a somewhat tired and mentally exhausted Sable, waiting on her response. "Oh, it's going well," Sable responded, sitting there in a white t-shirt and sweatpants, looking a stark difference from Geraldine. Geraldine asked, "Would you like to go food shopping today, Sable?" "Earlier I promised I'd take you, and I'm just keeping my word." Sable replied, "Oh, that'd be perfect, but I'd have to take a bath and get dressed first, my morning routine." Geraldine told Sable not to rush, saying, "Hey, how about I go run a few errands and be back in a couple of hours? That sound about right." Geraldine was good at asking you if something sounded about right. Heaven forbid if someone were to say no. Nevertheless, Sable agreed and Geraldine left, with the plan of returning in a few hours, allowing Sable to take her time and absorb her mid-morning. Sable locked the front door behind Geraldine and returned to the bathroom where a good amount of water had soaked up through the towels, and the hallway carpet near the bathroom door was wet and sure to smell like mildew if Sable didn't find a way to soak up the water from the carpet and dry it before that could happen. Sable found a mop inside of a small, lean, compartmented door near the hallway linen closet and mopped up the rest of the water, squeezing out the excess water in an old blue bucket and pouring the excess water into the commode and flushing it. This went on for a good 15 minutes until the floor was dry and the towels had soaked up the remaining water from out of the carpet near the bathroom door. By this time, Sable was even more frustrated and tuckered out. She peeled off her sweats and slowly emerged herself into what was supposed to be a hot bubble bath, but was now just a lukewarm tub of water. Sable sank below the surface of the water, trying to erase all of the thoughts that plagued her mind. She felt all the anger and frustration building up in her like a lit firecracker waiting to pop off. As soon as she felt this anger emerge, Sable heard the deep crackle of an ancient voice, like wood crackling in a fireplace, saying, "Sable, do you wish that all of those who anger you with their ignorance and obsessed behavior towards you would just simply go away?" Without thinking, once again, Sable yelled, "Yes." Immediately the voice anxiously replied in a deviant tone, "Pray for it. Do it now." Sable opened her mouth and caught herself, putting both hands over her mouth and once again emerging herself below the surface of the tub water, her eyes closed. Sable opened her eyes, looking up, seeing what looked like an evil djinn staring down at her through the water, with razor-sharp teeth pronounced, smiling at her just like Frankie said it was doing in the back seat of his car. Sable, frozen with fear, remembering Frankie's precaution, if you ask God to fight your battles, that renders the evil harmless. Sable quickly asked God sincerely, "Lord, fight my battle." And immediately, as soon as she opened her eyes, almost completely out of breath, that old slick djinn was gone. Sable sat up heaving, scared to death, water running from her face. She jumped out of the tub, grabbing the robe off of the hook on the back of the bathroom door, quickly walking into the bedroom and grabbing her phone off of the dresser and speed-dialed Frankie's phone, but it just rang and rang. Sable, scared and confused, left a message on Frankie's answering machine saying, "Frankie," it appeared again, "please call me ASAP." Sable was startled by a knock at the door. She hears women's voices talking just above a whisper. Sable tiptoed to the front window next to the porch to look through the side of the light gray blackout curtains and notices 3 women standing on the porch with dishes of food in their hands. All of a sudden, Sable hears her name being shouted by one of the women wearing a loud hot pink blouse. And just as she was about to close the curtain, the woman notices the curtain move and yells, "Hey, Sable! It's your neighbors, Rhoda, Thelma, and Ursula." Sable Eek gasped, feeling a lump in her throat. She knew she had been seen and didn't want to give a standoffish first impression. Sable walked slowly to the door, almost feeling as if she were walking over to welcome in some sort of potential chaos. She placed her hand on the doorknob and started to turn it, when all of a sudden someone laid on a loud car horn in front of the house. Sable inconspicuously pulled the side of the curtain again, just in time enough to see Geraldine pull up out front. The 3 ladies hurried down the driveway and down the street with dishes in hand, as if they were eager to leave all of a sudden. Geraldine sat in her red Mercedes, harboring an unmistakable glare at the 3 ladies as they scurried down the street and into the beautifully manicured yard with the modest carport and fig tree on the side of the house, each one looking back every few steps, seemingly to make sure Geraldine wasn't in pursuit of them, all 3 disappearing into the front door. Geraldine parked her Mercedes in front of Sable's house and turned off the car engine. She stepped out wearing a thin spaghetti strap, white form-fitting dress that complemented her voluptuous 5'11" frame, wearing her signature white strappy heels to match. Her skin glistening, fluffy light brown curls adorning her noticeably high cheekbones. She grabbed her tan clutch off of the front passenger seat. Red nails like claws pronounced as she pulled her red lipstick from her purse, taking her time while bending to look in the side view mirror to apply it. Suspecting the 3 ladies who hurried back down the street were now huddled together in Rhoda's living room window, watching her strut toward Sable's door and proceed inside as Sable opened it immediately upon hearing Geraldine's heels hit the front porch. Sable closed the door as soon as Geraldine stepped inside, anxiously asking Geraldine, "Who were those women at the front door?" Geraldine laughingly retorted, "Empties." Sable looked confused as Geraldine, whose perfume filled the room, following her all the way to the couch where she took a seat, crossed her legs, stretched out her arm over the top of the couch, and began to tell Sable about the empties as she laughed. "You know, Sable, there's a certain type of woman who internally lacks almost every category that it takes to make her feel secure in herself. You know, things like self-confidence, self-awareness, pride in her own abilities, inner beauty, and most of all, self-love. Now, with all of that missing, throw in a little insecurity about her outer appearance. And what does she carry, Sable?" Sable looked at Geraldine in a curious silence, then answered, "Nothing." Geraldine leaned forward on the couch, uncrossed her legs, and pointed directly at Sable and said, "Exactly. Empty as a hollow shell," responded Geraldine. Sable asked, "So what's the deal with those 3? I mean, what do they do all day?" Geraldine answered, "The same old boring things, day after day after day. Take Rhoda, for instance, an obsessive attention seeker, kids, and married to Mount Rushmore, yet seems completely unfulfilled. Word has it, a friend of hers told a church member that she became completely obsessed with some woman's social media platform, frequenting the woman's channel for recipes, watching, almost hoping for some sort of odd interaction with her for whatever reason. Just downright creepy, if you ask me." "Has she ever met the woman?" asked Sable, while chuckling under her breath. No, she doesn't know her at all, responded Geraldine. Yeah, there's definitely something wrong there, Sable shaking her head with one eyebrow raised. Geraldine added, I'll give you the 411 on all of the nonsense, so you'll keep your distance because the issues are insurmountable. They both laughed as Sable walked towards the bedroom to get dressed so her and Geraldine could finally go food item shopping. Sable and Geraldine spent an hour shopping, dropping off their food items at their houses. Geraldine decided to take Sable out to a hip little happy hour spot named The Tea to enjoy a little music and a much-needed cocktail. Geraldine handed the valet her Mercedes keys as she winked at the young man while walking away, Sable's face curious as the two ladies entered the establishment. There was a quaint little table in the corner of the restaurant, and all eyes were on Geraldine as soon as she stepped into the place. All of the women's eyes immediately looked at their significant others as Geraldine left a trail of eyes following her, not to mention the smell of her signature scent of gardenias as she and Sable walked over to their table and took a seat. Wow, Geraldine, this is nice. How often do you come here? Geraldine replied, I used to come here every Friday night, but the crowd has gotten a lot less mature over the past couple of years. Not really my cup of tea, no pun intended. Now I only come for happy hour every now and then, but Belladonna's Lounge, now that's the spot. Sable sat looking around the restaurant at the hip, low-key juvenile decor of the place. This young waitress immediately came to take Geraldine and Sable's order with a bothersome look on her face and a noticeable attitude. What's it gonna be for you ladies? The waitress asked with a sharp tone. Geraldine looked across the table at Sable and then looked back up at this annoyed waitress she'd never seen before and said, I'll have a strawberry margarita. The waitress then looked at Sable and said, What about you? Sable responded, I think I'll have the same, the waitress smirked, saying, Any entrees with those drinks? Sable replied, No, nothing for me, thanks. And what about you? The waitress added, turning with a funky disposition towards Geraldine's direction. Well, let me see. Geraldine opened the menu, squinting, saying, Oh, shoot, I left my glasses at home. Silly me. Can you read this side of the menu to me? As she stared up at the waitress, who now realized her first mistake. 20 minutes later, a much kinder and much more even-tempered waitress left the table, collecting the menus from Sable and Geraldine, undoubtedly now able to memorize the menu in its entirety from this day forward, having read it to Geraldine at least 30 times. Sable's first drink was almost finished, and she was beginning to loosen up as Geraldine hardly felt a buzz finishing her third drink. Sable looked at Geraldine and said, So, what do you do for a living, Geraldine? Geraldine smiled and said, I sing in the evenings at a nice little lounge across town, Belladonna's as a matter of fact. Sable looked down curiously, trying to remember where she'd heard the name Belladonna's. She looked up at Geraldine, saying, You know, I believe I've heard that name before, but just can't remember where. Geraldine finished up her drinks and called an Uber to take Sable home safely as she was on schedule to go in tonight at her singing gig at Belladonna's Lounge. The waitress, who now showed Geraldine and Sable the utmost respect, tallied up the cost of their drinks and collected her modest tip, waving as Geraldine and Sable walked out of the establishment. Geraldine waited until the Uber drove off with Sable making sure she was headed home, saying, Text me when you get home, girl. Let me know you've made it, all right? An inebriated, one-drink Sable smiled, waving and laying her head against the headrest on the cool leather in the back seat, slightly drifting in and out, taking short cat naps until the driver alerted her that she'd reached her residence, Sable slowly got out of the back seat, thanked the Uber driver for getting her home safely, then waited for him to back down the driveway before turning the front door key and walking into the house. As soon as Sable turned the lock and took one step away from the door, a hard knock caused her to jump. Sable looked at her watch, which displayed 8 p.m. Suddenly, Sable's paranoia kicked in, thinking about the last loud knock at the door that dreadful night in Alabama. Turns out it was Frankie helping her escape that tragic nightmare. The knocks persisted, and Sable, thinking it must be Geraldine coming to make sure she made it in, walked over to the door, clicking on the porch light before opening it, and was shocked to see it was Rhoda, the one with the gargantuan husband Geraldine jokingly calls Mount Rushmore, standing there staring at her with a crooked smile and a disproportionately pointed chin. "Yes, can I help you?" asked Sable. "Nice to finally catch up with you, new neighbor." Rhoda, overwrought and fanatically exclaimed, adding, "I was looking out of my living room window when I saw a car pull up in your driveway. I noticed it wasn't a red Mercedes, so I thought now was as safe a time as any to come and introduce myself to the new addition to our beautiful, quiet neighborhood." Sable looked confused as Rhoda stood staring at her from head to toe, and anywhere else her noticeably fast-moving eyes could immediately fixate on. Sable kindly retorted, trying to not give an inkling of just how creeped out she was about this whole grown woman giving off weird stalker vibes. "Thanks for the welcome, Rhoda, right? I appreciate that, but I'm just getting in. I haven't eaten all day, and was really just about to grab a bite." Suddenly, Rhoda moves past Sable in the doorway, inviting herself inside the house, saying, "Speaking of food, I'd love to show you a recipe or two that I got off of TikTok. You'll love these high-protein, low-carb recipes because, after all, food doesn't have to lack in flavor to be good for you." Giggle hissing, like a large human rat person under her breath, Sable cringed, watching screenshots of the slop this delusional recipe killer tried to push her way. In shock as this overly stimulated woman scrolled through her phone downloading recipes that Sable never asked for, Sable stood there looking at Rhoda, who supposedly kept accidentally snapping the photo button in her direction and saying, "Oops, my camera keeps accidentally snapping pics. My bad." Sable then pulled her phone from her pocket, pressing the ringtone button, pretending Geraldine was calling and on the way over, which immediately prompted this human bungee cord psycho to scurry out of Sable's house like the rat face she is and jump and jack down the street back to her living room stakeout spot where she seems to wait and watch. "My God," Sable sighed loudly, now rubbing her temples trying to scathe off the headache this human bungee jump left her with. She went into the kitchen, looking around to see what snacks she'd bought earlier, but then decided to make a lean cuisine meal, something fast and quick, yet indulging, and not the 3-step canned meals learned in your typical high school food and nutrition class from relay race Rhoda. Suddenly the phone rang, and there on the other end of the line was a familiar voice, Frankie, saying, "How's it going, Sable?" Sable was met with a calm and soothing feeling that blanketed her, responding, "Oh, Frankie, I'm so happy to hear from you. Things are going pretty good." "But when are you coming down?" Frankie hesitated and sighed, saying, "Probably not until next year. The whole town has been combing almost all of Tuscaloosa for clues as to what happened to the entire congregation. But don't you worry your pretty little head, Sable. This thing will blow over, all right? All right? Sable, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here, Frankie. I saw it at the house yesterday. Frankie replied, "You've got to be kidding me." Sable's voice started to crack, saying, "I was in the tub and dunked my head under water, opened my eyes, and there it was, standing over me with sharp teeth pronounced and a crooked smile. I prayed just like you told me, and instantly it disappeared, and I jumped out of the tub." Frankie then told a frightened Sable, "Don't respond to anything it asks you to do and stay prayed up. You hear me, Sable?" Sable quietly said, "Yes, I hear you, Frankie." Frankie then asked, "So what have you and Geraldine been up to?" Sable responded, "Well, she took me to the tea and got me tipsy." "Oh yeah, that she will do," said Frankie. Sable asked, "So Frankie, what's with Rhoda?" Frankie burst into a laughing fit and said, "She's a little over the top, I know." "What, Sable? Don't tell me she's already begun obsessing over you?" Frankie burst out laughing even harder, Sable interrupting him, saying, "What do you mean obsessing over me?" "She's a grown woman. I highly doubt that a grown married woman with kids would spend her time obsessing over me. Hell, I'm at least 20 years her senior. And I mind my own business." Frankie added, "You definitely don't look 20 years her senior. Maybe that's her problem, Sable. Your looks make her insecure. She probably thinks you should look and act as boring as she does," Frankie said, trying to contain his obvious amusement about the subject. Sable laughed, saying, "Oh, Frankie, you got jokes. Well, I'll tell you what. You make me insecure. How about that?" The two laughed while enjoying each other's conversation, and it seemed to be just what Sable needed, the familiarity of a close friend, to feel a taste of home. They talked for hours. Sable went to bed with the nightlight on, and as she laid there, she looked up at the old Bible on the dresser, and it dawned on her where she'd seen the name. "That's it!" Sable yelled. The lounge where Geraldine said she worked singing nights. Sable jumped out of bed and quickly walked over to the Bible, with the silky pink cover lying on the dresser. Opened the first page, and there it was. The name Jacqueline Belladonna, written on the context page, with Glory Hallelujah written next to it. Sable sat on the bed saying under her breath, "Damn it, I forgot to ask Frankie, who is Jacqueline Belladonna?" Thinking to herself, something about that name from childhood sounded awfully familiar. Sable stayed awake, scared to fall asleep, knowing that this dark djinn was around her, eager for her to slip up and throw him more unsuspecting targets. She soon drifted off to sleep with her mind racing about her deceased fiancé, Reverend Humphrey, lying in front of the church dead because of her prayer. She tossed and turned, feeling guilty about praying that the congregation would all just go away and having it actually happen. Sable kept seeing the faces of the angry congregation running behind her while she pleaded her innocence. Sable opened her eyes, and there in the corner of the room, in the full-length mirror, was the dark figure standing there glaring at her, mocking her, saying, "Did you remember to say your prayers?" Laughing gutturally, Sable jolted up, sweating profusely, not knowing if she just dreamt that nightmare or if it really happened. Sable got out of bed and went into the kitchen to make herself a hot cup of chamomile tea. It always calmed her nerves whenever she felt anxious or nervous. Sable clicked on the kitchen light and screamed to the top of her lungs when she noticed Thelma from up the street, with her head lying on the table, passed out and not moving a muscle. "Hey, hey!" Sable yelled aloud, but nothing. She didn't budge. Sable began having flashbacks of the good Reverend when all of a sudden the doorbell rang. Sable was scared, but rushed to the door, thinking it just might be Thelma's son or husband coming to retrieve her, but no, instead it was a woman, a rather tall woman, about 6 feet tall to be exact. She asked to come in, and Sable hesitated, thinking this was some sort of setup. Sable said, "Who are you, ma'am? And why are you here at 3 a.m. in the morning? The tall lady had a sculpted updo hairstyle that matched her hard-warden-looking expression, high heels, if you can believe that, and a black oriental jacket with gold-printed flowers throughout. In a low-toned, deep and heavy, smoky-speaking voice, she said, "I'm Jacqueline Belladonna, the owner of this home." Sable slowly opened the door as the woman entered, a long-lit cigar in her mouth. Sable began to cough from the smoke as the woman walked over to Thelma, snapped her finger at the side of her ear, and Thelma woke immediately, embarrassed and apologizing as she stood up, seemingly a bit frightened of Miss Belladonna, who looked at her and said sternly, "You've been sleepwalking again, haven't you?" Thelma, standing there in her nightgown, said, "I suppose I have. I thought I was cured." Sable stood there in complete shock as she witnessed some sort of mind control Miss Belladonna had on Thelma. Sable asked Thelma while walking over to her, "Are you all right?" Just then, Miss Belladonna interrupted, saying, "Oh, she's fine, Sable. Now run along, Thelma. Go back to bed, dear, and I'll talk to you tomorrow." Thelma hastened out of the house and hurried down the street as Sable noticed Rhoda in the window, trying not to be seen. Sable closed the door and stood there stupefied at the sheer arrogance of this woman. Jacqueline Belladonna said to Sable, "Come, take a seat." Sable walked over to the couch and sat down, studying Miss Belladonna, who seemed to be rather pleasant in her approach. Sable asked, "What brings you here in the middle of the night?" Miss Belladonna replied, "Technically, it's early morning, darling. 3 a.m. is not considered middle of the night. And what brings me here? You. You're the reason I'm here." Sable looked confused. "I thought this was Frankie's house." Miss Belladonna retorted, "And it was his house until you moved in it. Now it's your house. It's your house now, Miss Sinclair." Sable looked at the mysterious Jacqueline Belladonna, saying, "Wait, how's that possible? I mean, I didn't, wait, how do you know my name?" Miss Belladonna interrupted, saying, "I know everything about everyone, and I'll be in touch, my dear Sable. Oh, and just so you know, there is a neighborhood watcher." Jacqueline Belladonna laughed the most sinister laugh as a trail of cigar smoke followed her out of the door. She got into a black limo with the windows tinted so black that no one could be seen inside up close or from afar. As soon as Sable closed the front door, she locked it, even using the deadbolt. Sable frantically tried to call Frankie, but kept getting his voicemail. The same with Geraldine, nothing. Sable felt the same sinking feeling just like in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Same-ish, different place, but only this felt a little different, a little more calculated. But one thing they didn't know about Sable was she had a dark regulator waiting in the wings, just in case she needed to clear a few obstacles, you know what I mean? And she was just the woman to do it.